Good morning. Hello, hi, and welcome. We are going to be talking about some geometry today for April 27th through May 1st. We have two topics to go over. First one is completing the square, and second is the advanced forms of circle equations. Yeah, so things are going to get a little bit harder this week. You guys can handle it though. Here's the big goal. We are going to get some equations that are going to look a little bit more diverse than what we had last week, where we were going to have something like x squared plus 4x plus y squared minus, let's go with 16y, and that's going to equal some number, we'll call it 28. And we're going to figure out how to graph this. A few things we're going to have to learn how to do this week. The first one is how to solve an equation that looks something like this. And we're going to be using this method called completing the square. Now, in this whole method, got a lot of talking on this, but the first thing I want to bring to your guys' attention is this idea of we have r squared plus 16r plus 58 equals -5. Now, if you guys did Algebra 1, Algebra 2, you guys learned a few methods, quadratic formula, factoring, a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to add one more to that today, and it's called completing the square. So the goal of that is to get into something that looks like x plus a number squared equals something over here. So that's our whole goal, is we're going to try to get to something that looks like this. Now I'm going to show you guys how to do that here. We're going to have a few drills on this, some practice for you, and then I'm going to show you how it applies to a circle. Today is going to be probably a slightly longer video. I'm going to try to go through pretty slowly, but use that back button if you need to. All right, so the first thing I want to do is get my variables alone. And we're going to call that variables on the left. So we're going to subtract 58 off both sides. And that's going to leave us with r squared plus 16r equals -5 minus 58 takes us to -63. Cool. Don't worry about anything being perfect quite yet. Stuff's going to just work out. You got to trust me a little bit on this. So don't think, especially after the first step, don't think you made a mistake. Okay, so from here, we are going to talk about the fact that we've got this thing called a quadratic. And a quadratic always appears in this ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're missing c in here. I'm going to drag this over just a little so you guys can see. There could be a third thing here that would not have a variable by it. We've got our squared variable with this r squared. We've got our constant variable with the 16, and then we're looking at just nothing. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how to find that value. And we're going to use a little formula that's negative b divided by 2 squared. I'm going to write negative. B divided by 2 squared. So just b divided by 2 squared. In this case, our b is 16. So our b divided by 2 squared would be 16 divided by 2 squared. Do both those steps in correct order. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 squared is 64. So this guy is going to be C. Now, if you remember, you can't just magically add numbers. We've kind of been fighting that for a few years now. Numbers just can't come out of nowhere. But we're going to use a little trick. One of the few we do. And that trick is going to be, we're going to add it and subtract it. Because you can kind of do whatever you want as long as you haven't changed anything. Plus 64 minus 64. Adding and subtracting 64, we know that's 0. And that equals -63. So our step 2 here, and we've kind of already done it, find our C, and add, subtract. This does take some practice. This takes some getting used to. Step 3. We are going to put parentheses around the first 3. So I'm going to have parentheses here, r squared plus 16r plus 64 minus 64 equals negative 63. We're going to do that. And then we're going to get the last value over to the right. Like I said, this is one of the more in-depth things we've done, but you guys can handle this. So add 64 to both sides. That cancels it out here. And that leaves me with 1 on the right and the rest of this stuff, r squared, if I can make an r today, plus 16r plus 64. All right. So hopefully you guys are keeping up with this. Make sure you hit that back button if you need to see something that happened. And I'm going to be doing plenty more examples here. But if you remember back to when I talked up here, we are trying to get this into a x plus some value squared equals a number. Well, I got equals a number. I got my parentheses. We just got to get that into the squared form correctly. What we're going to do to make this all work out simply, if Subway would stop telling me what I should eat for lunch, is we're going to go back and we're going to look at this guy. And we're going to look at 8. Hopefully you guys can all see that. We're going to look at this, and this is going to travel down to where we're at here. And it does a kind of cool thing. This just becomes r plus, because it's a positive 8, 8 squared equals 1. These guys went into the factoring, okay? This is not a case of disappearing values. If you expanded this all back out to being r plus 8, and you FOILed, you'll get right back to that. We're just taking a little shortcut in completing the square. It'll always work when we're doing completing the square, and it's pretty nice that way. So to finish this equation off, to solve it, we are going to go ahead and square root. So I've got r plus 8 in a square equals 1. We're going to square root both sides. That gives me r plus 8 equals positive or negative. We call that plus or minus. Don't jump down on me. 1. Solve this like normal. And we do that by subtracting 8 from both sides. Now you're going to have 2 possible answers here. R equals 1 plus 8, or R equals negative 1. Sorry, minus. So R equals 1 minus 8, or R equals negative 1 minus 8, which would of course be negative 7 or negative 9. So one of the things I have you doing today is just some basic drills to get into this format. And all this is going to be is figuring out what your C value should be. So to kind of reiterate that point, because it's, to me, the most confusing, we're going to take 22, that's our B, divide it by 2, and square it. 22 divided by 2, I want to write all this out, is 11 squared. And 11 squared, you can plug that in a calculator if it's not off the top of your head, is 121, which is my C value. That's going to, and so this is the answer that's going to go into this. Take one more look. This should be, you should be able to do this one without me. I'd pause right here if I were you. You're going to do 6, you're going to deal with 6 a lot, but 6 divided by 2, squared to find the c value. So that is 3 squared, which is 9. Remember that you're looking for b divided by 2 and square that to get this guy. Okie dokie. All right. We're going to work one more problem all the way through, full completing the square, full everything. We're going to try to take our time and make this as easy to follow along as possible. So first step here, I'm going to go ahead and add 56 to both sides. Not right now. So I'm going to, sorry about that. So k squared plus 12k equals 7 plus 56 will get me back to 63. That seems familiar, but we're positive, we're great. Second step, we're going to look at our b value here. That's 12. Now I'll look at a different color, and we'll have 12 divided by 2 squared, which is of course 6 squared, which is 36. So for this, using this 36, I'm going to add that and subtract it from both sides. So that gives, or add that to, and subtract at the same time. So k squared plus 12k plus 36 minus 36 equals 63. Most of this stuff is just following along from what we had. And this is our new part that comes from over here. If you remember, our next step is I take and I put parentheses around the first 3, and I get rid of the 4th over to the right by adding it. So that's going to be plus 36 plus 36. 63 plus 36 is 99. Go away. And I get k squared plus 12k plus 36 equals 99. We want to factor this on down. So we take our parentheses. K is going to be here. This was a positive 6, so plus 6 squared equals 99. To simplify this on down in our final little bit, we are going to, I'll use purple. We'll square root both sides. So square root of k plus 6 quantity squared is k plus 6. Square root of 99 is going to be positive or negative 3 times the square root of 11. If you forgot how to do that, we did it in the last week's video, or you can jump on anytime on Zoom and I'll show you how that works. So this gives me, let me show that subtraction here. So we're going to subtract 6 off both sides. So that gives me k equals negative 6 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 11. And you can plug that straight into the calculator, Desmos, or a personal calculator, whatever you got. All right, so here's the main event. This is going to be write an equation of a circle. So you're going to write this as x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. You're going to be able to graph this. We went over all the graphing instructions last week, so I'm going to exclude that part to try to keep this video in something that resembles a decent time. Here is your biggest step. Step 1 is the big step, and it is reorganize. So I want to get everything to where my x's and my y's are kind of together. My numbers are on the right, and everything kind of works out a little nicer. So a lot of reorganization to do here. I'm going to take this x squared minus 20x, and it can just move. X squared minus 20x. Great. I'm going to leave this in a little bracket. I don't want anything without a variable on my left-hand side. So I've got a positive y squared, which is very helpful, but I need to get this 14 over, and you know you do that by adding 14y to both sides. So I've got y squared plus 14y, and that's going to equal negative 77. Like I said from before, don't try to worry about the negative here, just work your way on through. So second step is you got to complete the square for both sides. Not sides, variables. Complete the square on both variables. So with this, I'm going to identify my minus 20 here as my b in this. And negative, I'm sorry, why do I, because quadratic formula. B divided by 2 squared is negative 20 divided by 2 squared, which is negative 10 being squared, which is 100. I am also going to, at the same time, look at this 14. It's positive. So that's going to be 14 divided by 2 squared, doing our same b divided by 2 squared, equals 7 squared, which equals 49. I like less line here. So we're going to do all the completing the square stuff on both these variables here and get a big rewrite. So our big rewrite, let's look at purple. I've got x squared minus 20x. What we did in the red was find the b there, so plus 100 minus 100. Plus y squared plus 14y, that's just coming along from what we had, plus 49 minus 49 equals negative 77. So everything's got its rewritten form. You found both b's on this, and we go through and then we finish this off. We're just going to finish it off by adding. Believe it or not, we start off, we're going to add 100 to both sides. We're also going to add 49 to both sides. Because remember, we want those first 3 values in each variable this time by themselves. We are also, I'll go ahead and just rewrite this. So we've got x squared minus 20x plus 100 plus y squared plus 14y plus 49 equals negative 77 plus 100 plus 49. Make sure in your calculator you put, still got a calculator. So negative 77 plus 100 plus 49, and that gives us 72. Great. We've still got these guys in our parentheses here. They're going to complete the square based upon what we did earlier, which is I'm going to grab these values from up here. This minus 10 makes this x minus 10 squared, plus from my second equation, I've got 7 here, y plus 7 squared equals 72. This gives me a center at positive 10, negative 7, and a radius at the square root of 72. I know 72 is not a perfect square. It does divide nicely by a perfect square, which the perfect square there would be 36. Like I said, if you need any help, see the previous videos or come talk to me about how this reduces. But I'm going to split this into its perfect part, which is 36, its non-perfect part, which is 2. So that means that my radius is going to equal, let's take this out of pink, 6 times the square root of 2. And you can calculate that and approximate it out. All right, I'm going to cut this here because I don't want to get too much longer. If you need more help, see the Delta Math, see this video again. I'll be posting some examples. Come see me on Zoom, and I'll be happy to help. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Should stop recording, shouldn't I?